Hi, everybody. John Haldy with Haldy Technologies here, and I'm very excited to have Mitch Adams, the founder and CEO of M3Traffic, located in southern Utah. And Mitch has graciously agreed to talk to us today about recruiting and all things tangentially related. Mitch, welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I have to tell you, I watched the video that you did with Randy a little ways back. Loved it, and I hope that we can build on that and continue to help the audience learn, if that's okay with you.
Yes, absolutely. Make sure you get a link in there for that. And it was a good recording because that's from a contractor's perspective, what they're doing and how they've grown exponentially. I think when I started working with him, he had like 50 or 60 trucks, and today he has over 120. And most of that was organic. They bought some stuff along the way, as I understand it, but a lot of that was organically and really being able to keep drivers in the seats.
You talk about growing from 50 to 60 trucks to 120, but the challenge, as I understand it, is he had to fill the seats for all those trucks, and he's doing teams. So that was probably like recruiting at least 120 drivers.
Yeah, at least. Yeah. And that was in let's see, it was like 2.5 years when we recorded that. By now it's been almost 3 years. So
yeah, I mean,
relatively short time as well.
Now, with your permission, though, because I think Randy is playing at a Jedi level of understanding recruiting. I talk to a lot of contractors all the time, and I'm not a contractor myself, but there are some common themes that I've heard, and I'd love to maybe dial it back and talk about some more basic things and then get into the more advanced things.
Absolutely.
With your permission, I'm going to role play a newer contractor and just pretend like I cornered you on a plane and I get a chance to talk to you for 30 or 40 minutes about this. Is that cool?
Yep.
So, one of the things that I find very fascinating is that most folks, they drop ads on Craigslist, they drop ads on Indeed, all the places that you would reasonably expect a driver looking for a job to go. But you seem to have a different take with this Facebook thing. Can you tell us why it's important to look elsewhere?
Yeah, so the way I look at it is some of you guys watching this probably fish. And I like to kind of picture two ponds. One pond is the very common pond that everyone goes to. And because everyone goes to it, there's really not all that many fish. And so I've actually had a picture drawn up where there's like 10 fish in the water and like 20 people around the pond fishing for it. In that example, everyone's going to get half a fish, or only half the people are going to get one fish, right? But there's always the other ponds that are a little bit more hidden, a little bit harder to get to, but not too bad. Just a short walk through some trees or whatever. And there's way more fish, but there's way less people fishing in those ponds. And so you flip those numbers. There's 20 fish. There's only 10 people fishing. Now, every single driver or every single recruiter is going to get on average 2 fish or 2 drivers. And that's really how I look at it. All the common places, the job boards, Indeed, Craigslist, Monster, what are all the other job boards? Every single trucking company owner that I've talked to, they are on one or all of those recruiting. And if you think about it, I did a quick Google search and it said that in any given industry, then about 70% of those people are looking for a job at any given time. I didn't find a statistics specifically for the trucking industry, but I would venture to guess that it's a lot lower in the trucking industry. So let's say 40% of drivers are looking for a job at any time. So now you're going to these job boards where 100% of the companies are searching, but there's only 40% of the driver market. So it's so competitive. Everyone's there. And that's what I've been hearing lately is the costs are going up, getting less effective, and it's just not working as well.
Now, I'm a techie, so I know a little bit about how these big tech companies work. And I know that Amazon's model is if you're in the market to buy a winter coat, they want you to come to Amazon and type winter coat, and then you're going to have all these different vendors offering their winter coat. And Google's model is a little differently because if you search for best winter coat, they want to push sponsored ads in front of you from people selling winter coats, right? To take you wherever, whether it be Amazon. But Facebook has always had more of a, and there's a term for it, and I'm going to get it wrong, but like an incidental advertising, where someone's not actually looking for a winter coat. But if you put an ad in front of them about winter coats, you're going to have better luck with them saying, oh, maybe I do need a winter coat. And now you've got the ad in front of them right when that moment of, oh, I'm looking at this happens. Is it similar for recruiting drivers?
Yeah, that's exactly the concept. So you flip the previous percentages, and 90% of humans are on social media, which includes truck drivers. Maybe the percentage is even higher. I don't know. But so now we're 90% of drivers are on Facebook, and they're just scrolling through. They're looking at their friends' posts. They're looking at the groups. They're looking at cat videos. They're looking at fancy trucks, probably. But then we put an ad in front of them that says, hey, here's a better opportunity. That's really the approach. Here's a better opportunity. You're probably already driving, but here's a better opportunity, better pay, more steady miles, steady paycheck, steady home time. All the FedEx contractors have these additional benefits that other companies don't offer. So yeah, you put it in front of them. They weren't necessarily looking for a job, but when they see a better opportunity, they're like, oh, that's quite a bit more per week. Why don't I just go apply, see what happens? And now, so you're fishing after 90% of the drivers, but there's only, when I talk to companies, I would say maybe 1 out of 10 mention that they're doing anything on Facebook. And so there's a few on there. You're not going to be the only one, obviously, but definitely less than what's on the job boards.
I heard something interesting from one contractor who said they like Facebook also because it's not always the driver looking. Oftentimes it's a spouse who sees something and then tells their husband or wife who's driving, I saw this and they're offering more money. Why aren't you looking at that? And they wouldn't necessarily be on Indeed, but they see this because they're looking at cat videos and they see an ad. True or false? Do you ever see that?
I haven't heard that feedback, but it makes sense because, we do have to target just very generally and really people that are interested in semi-trailer truck and logistics. And so the spouse of a driver would probably fall into those interests and then see that. The other feedback that I hear is that if a driver is looking for a job, like looking hard for a job, meaning on the job boards, there's probably a reason they're looking. And it's not because they're a great driver, because no company is going to let go of a good driver right now. So that's the other feedback I've heard, is that we're going after people that already have jobs. They're already happy. They're doing well. Not 100% of them, but a lot of them already have a job. And so then it's just switching them to a better opportunity. It's not dealing with all of their issues.
And those people wouldn't normally be on Indeed and other places actively looking.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So to take your fishing analogy, I'm going to run with that, probably to my detriment, but for fishing, when you get a bite, you got to set the hook, right?
Yep.
Let's talk about quick follow-up and where people fail on that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I think I've heard the statistics somewhere, and whether it's accurate or not, it still paints the picture. And so quick follow-up, quick response to your leads, meaning within 5 minutes. And this is widely known in the sales world, the recruiting world, everything where you're dealing with leads coming in. If you can get back to them within 5 minutes, you're 90% more likely to hire them, is the statistic I've heard. And the reason is they saw the ad, they thought it might have even been a fleeting moment. They thought, oh, that would be good. And then if you talk to them and then you continue that conversation, you kind of set the hook, as you said. You get them more excited about it. Whereas if you wait a day to call them back, they've forgotten about it. They're like, oh yeah, I guess I did apply for a job yesterday. That's all right. I had a good day at my job today. So, that's kind of the concept. So the quicker you can get to them, the better. And then in addition, then also multiple times. Sometimes they don't answer the first time. So call 5 more times.
I know that larger contractors might have a dedicated recruiter or recruiters, or have figured out a way to staff for this as a function that's critical to their business. A guy like Randy with 120 trucks, I suspect he's not doing this ad hoc. I mean, he's focused on this.
Right.
let's say I've got 10 trucks, right? Any tactical advice on how someone like me can, if I've got 10 trucks, can try to get back to someone who might be calling at any hour of any day, and I'm trying to do a 5-minute follow-up?
Right. Yeah. So in the beginning, and most of my clients, they do it themselves when they're at that size, and it's tough. It's a tough balance because especially at 10 trucks, you have a lot going on. But recruiting is a very, very important part of the job. And so I think, I guess, two answers. Number one is put the focus on it, because all of the big contractors, they view themselves as a staffing company. So that is their number one responsibility, is the recruiting part. So put the focus on it as such. Number two is there is technology that can help. I set up for my clients technology that the lead comes in, and within 5 minutes we text the lead and say, hey, first name. We program in their first name and your first name so that it sounds more personal. It says, hey, John, this is Mitch. I'm excited you're interested in my driving position. The next step is to schedule a phone screening interview. Click here, book a time on my calendar, and then we'll do the phone screening interview that way. I find that about 50% of the drivers will schedule themselves. So that takes care of 50% of the leads. So now let's say you're getting 30 leads in a month. 15 of them have taken care of themselves.
Let me make sure I understand that. The text goes out automatically. I'm not woken up to do that.
Correct.
And the follow-up of, why don't you schedule time on my calendar? That's automatic too.
Yep, that's correct. And you don't have to do any of that. It just goes out automatically.
Okay. Does anybody try using things like phone services, like a messaging service where somebody else will answer the phone and talk to them at that hour or call them?
We've done a little bit of testing with that. It's still in the testing phase, but I know in other, I think that's something to look into. I know that in other industries, for instance, I've done some real estate lead generation, and a big thing is to have outsourced phone services call the leads and do that initial pre-screening. It's a little tougher in the trucking market these days because you really need to sell them on why they want to drive with you specifically. And so the best way to do that is to have them talk to you or a recruiter that's on your team, selling them right from the get-go, selling them on why they want to drive with you rather than go elsewhere.
Can I pick at that a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
I have heard some contractors say that they've tried to delegate the initial contact handling to some of their driver managers. And it's kind of hit or miss. And it seems to me like a lot of it depends on whether the driver manager has what I'll call a sales instinct, that they know that they're trying to sell the job, as opposed to someone who's got an approach of, this is just one more person calling me that I have to dispatch as quickly as possible to get my job done. They're not really focused on sales. Do you find in your experience that there's a misunderstanding about the fact that recruiting is actually a sales job?
Yes. Yeah, I do notice that misunderstanding a lot. And I think, honestly, if you guys could take anything away from this, switch your mindset of this from a recruiting job, HR job, to a sales job. Even if you have the HR person doing it, shift the focus to, this is a sales job, because it's even more important. I think it's important always, but especially in today's market where there is a driver shortage. If you don't sell them on why they want to drive with you, then they can go get another 5 jobs tomorrow. And in addition, you have to sell them on why they want to drive with you so bad that they want to stick through the First Advantage process for 1 to 2 weeks. So it's a hard sales job. It's not even an easy sales job. But that is absolutely crucial to change your mindset from recruiting to, this is a sales job. And to your original point of having driver managers do it, or even drivers, I've seen it go both ways, where some drivers are, or driver managers that were previously drivers, or whatever the case may be, if they have a driving background, I've seen that work well because they can really relate to the other driver. But I've also seen it go the other way as well. So it is hit or miss. And I guess the way I would think about it is, if you have somebody in your company that you're thinking, oh, they would be good at this, just think of it in terms of a sales position. and maybe even invest in some sales training for them.
Okay. Yeah, because I can tell you on the software side, we have a great team here, and we have some folks who are phenomenal at what they do, but they'll tell you right away that they should not be the one talking to potential customers. It's just not in their DNA.
Yeah. Yep.
And other folks take to it like a duck to water, and it just, but yeah, I that makes sense to me. And I can see why drivers or driver managers could do it well, but if they don't have a selling instinct, it's going to be a fail, right?
Yeah.
What are you seeing in terms, go back to the fishing analogy, what are you seeing as some of the better ways to bait the hook? Everybody talks about cents per mile, right? Is that the dominant thing? Or in this market, are people talking about things like benefits and work from home, get home every night, and new equipment and some of the other things you hear about? What's the spectrum, and what do you think works and doesn't work in today's market?
Yeah, so I love working with FedEx contractors because all of them offer a good job. And so really the bait, the hook that we are putting out there is three primary things: steady miles, because you guys have as many miles as you need to give them, steady paycheck, and then steady home time. So those are kind of the three focuses that they offer. But then in addition, then we talk about, we go into the specifics of that, I guess. We go into the specifics of what is the paycheck going to be. I usually like, rather than a cents per mile, I usually like to do a weekly number or a yearly number, because I've had a lot of contractors tell me like, oh, there's other jobs out there offering $1 per mile. But what they don't include in that is they got to pay for their own insurance, their own blah, 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 right? And so now it narrows it down to actually 60 cents per mile, but they just touted this $1 per mile or something silly. And so I usually like to just go to the weekly number or the annual number. Well, actually both. I'll use both on the landing page. And then as far as home time, then we'll talk about the home time. With team routes, then it's typically home weekly. With solo routes, it's typically home daily. And so we really focus on that. And then the third or fourth thing I guess we focus on is the new equipment. Most of the guys I work with are running newer trucks. And I have gotten a lot of feedback that those are the most important things: home time, pay, and the equipment that you're driving. And so we focus on those three things. And that's why I like working with FedEx contractors, because they have those three things dialed.
They do, but okay, I'm gonna shift gears a little, because this one's kind of bugged me. I spoke to a contractor one time, and he had what I thought was a very non-standard approach to this. In his market that he was recruiting, at the time, it was like 65 to 70 cents a mile was the norm in that market.
Mm-hmm.
And he was convinced he was such a good salesperson that he could hire people at 57 cents a mile.
Mm-hmm.
How important is it to be in the normal market range for where you're hiring? Is it really true that you could be so good at selling your job that you could get drivers? Or was that person kidding himself, and he's actually just going to have a lot of churn because he might recruit them, but as soon as they see the other offer, they're gone?
Yeah. I think, you can't be, in my experience, you can't be that far below. Now, do you have to be the highest paid out there? No. Randy, that we talked about earlier in the call, then on the video that he did with me, he told me he's not the highest paying person in the area, but he does have his sales process dialed. He has his benefits dialed. He has his culture dialed. All those other things play into it, but you can't be paying them, $1,000 less per week and expect that your culture is going to make up for that $1,000 a week, right? So I would say you have to be in the ballpark, and then you're selling. So you said the ballpark in that market was 65 to 70 cents a mile. Let's say you want to be on the lower end, you could be at 65 cents a mile, but then your culture, your benefits, your selling abilities, all of those things can make up that little bit of a difference. But, being an extra 10 cents below, that adds up to quite a bit. And it's going to be a hard uphill battle. And I mean, if you can keep your trucks full that way, that's awesome. But I haven't seen it work too often.
When you work with clients and you're trying to help them understand what the market is for where they're recruiting. Do you bump into situations where it's almost like in real estate, someone says, I want to sell my house for 400 grand and the house is worth 320, and they get pissed off at the broker because there's nobody bidding on their house at 400. Do you find that you sometimes have a disconnect with your customers, with contractors who think they should be able to get drivers for 58 cents a mile, and you can tell from what you're seeing that it's 72 cents a mile bid?
Yeah. I haven't ran into that a whole lot, because I found that all of the contractors that I work with are paying competitive rates. So
Okay.
I haven't ran into that yet. I could see where that would be a problem, but I haven't ran into it yet.
Okay.
And the other thing that we can do is we can put the ads out there, and if we start getting leads, then great. If we're not getting leads, then we can go back to the drawing board and say, okay, how can we change this offer? Do we need to increase the amount that we're paying? Do we need to add a sign-on bonus? Do we need to add focus on some of the other benefits? And sometimes the answer is like, let's make it more clear that we're offering medical insurance, or let's make it more clear that they're going to be home daily, or make it more clear that this is actually a shorter driving position. You know, like a lot of these jobs, they'll be making 13 to 1500 a week, but they're 10-hour days or something. Well, I've had other people talk to me that it's like 6-hour days, and it's like a thousand a week. So making it more clear that it's a shorter driving position. There's things like that. You got to make sure that you're getting the right information out there. And with FedEx jobs, like I said, most people, they're all pretty standard. And so we put the right thing out there the first time. But there can be those situations where we need to test it a little bit and just see if we get leads, then go back to the drawing board, change it a little bit, and see if we can get leads again.
Randy talked a lot about being data driven, about looking at the numbers, understanding how many ads do you have to place and what do you have to spend in order to generate this many leads, in order to whittle it down to this many qualified, to this many folks who actually complete the application and then get hired.
Yes.
You said he's got 120 trucks. It means he's got 250 drivers if they're all teams, which I think he mostly is. You know, what do you tell someone with 8 trucks that are all solo and he basically needs eight to 10 drivers? Can that person be data driven? Can they do the same type of analysis with that small of a sample set?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the larger sample size you have, the more accurate the data is, right? But it still works out to be a pretty big sample size, because lead generation or recruiting is a numbers game, whether you're doing this with Indeed and the job boards, or whether you're doing this with Facebook with me, or Facebook with somebody else, whatever. Lead generation and recruiting is a numbers game. And so, you know, even when you're trying to recruit 8 drivers, you still got to get probably 160 leads. A lot of the feedback I get is that drivers or companies are able to recruit about 5%, meaning 1 out of 20. So to get 8 drivers, you still need 160 leads, which becomes a decent sample size. And some of the numbers to track is just track and improve is first off your cost per lead, which in my case, that comes from me. I tell you what your cost per lead is. I give you that data. But then the next one is, okay, how many do we get in contact with? You're going to want to get in contact with 50 to 70% of them. If you're not getting in contact with 50 to 70% of your leads, like, that's your problem. So go focus on that. Figure out, how can I call them faster? How can I text them automatically? Whatever the case may be, figure that out. Then the next one, contacted. Then the next one would be, how many can you get into First Advantage? And I can't remember the percentages that I would shoot for right now, but track that. How many can you get into First Advantage, and then try to improve it. And then the First Advantage, how many can you get through First Advantage? And I think you just said you did another video on how to help people get through First Advantage more effectively.
Yeah, by the time this gets out, that one with Ed Trout is going to be out there already in the wild.
Cool. Yeah, I would link that in this video, because that's probably the biggest challenge that my clients are facing right now, I would say. Because, I mean, once they're working with me, not to toot my own horn, they're getting leads. Like, leads is not their problem anymore. So then the problem is either contacting them or getting them through First Advantage. And I think getting them through First Advantage is probably a bigger deal. And there's lots of things that you can learn of how to do that more effectively. it's not just hand it over and wait. There are things that you can be doing to get them through faster.
Yeah, Ed talked about that at length.
Oh, cool.
That is the
Very
whole
cool.
rail for everyone. So
Yes. Yeah. So make sure if that's where you're at stuck in the process, then go finish this video first, but then go watch that video and learn some tricks to get them through First Advantage. Because it doesn't matter where you're getting your leads from. You still have to get them through First Advantage. And that's still a massive hangup. And the faster you can get people through, the more effective you will be at recruiting. You take it from 1 out of 20 to 1 out of 15. That's going to cut your cost per hire a lot more than cutting your cost per lead by $5 by trying to go somewhere else.
you mentioned something which I've heard, and I believe it to be true, that every one of these contractors watching this video is essentially a staffing agency and a fleet manager, right? Their job's to keep trucks on the road and drivers in the seat.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little different compared to a traditional trucking company because they're given the freight, they're given the assignments, they know what they're doing. So they don't have a sales and marketing function and those kinds of things for getting freight, right?
Right.
But I see a pattern with a lot of smaller contractors and even mid-sized contractors where they don't treat staffing as their core competency. They look at it as some necessary evil they've got to deal with, but they've got so many other things that they have to do for FedEx, between compliance for FedEx, DOT compliance, everything associated with running a business, that this is just one more thing they have to deal with. And I'm kind of shocked, especially when I hear that, oh, I've got enough drivers, I'm not going to focus on recruiting for 4 weeks unless someone quits. And that just seems counterintuitive to me if that's the core business. Do you bump into that mindset?
Yeah, a little bit. And I learned it early in working with some of the first contractors that I worked with, that the bigger contractors, that, like you said, that's how they view themselves. They view themselves as a glorified staffing company that happen to also manage a fleet of trucks. And so that is their first primary focus in business, and they are always recruiting. They don't stop. And so I would treat it that way, even as a smaller contractor. And you do still have to deal with those other things, but Aldi Tech, you guys help with some of those back end things to make it quicker and more efficient.
We try
to get that hopefully out of the way. So yeah, I would recommend you focus on it. Oh, and waiting until somebody quits to recruit. I would say it's a tough balance when you're smaller, because recruiting is not a small expense. And so you want to, make that the most efficient. However, if you wait, you say, oh, I'm going to pause on recruiting, then you have a driver quit. Well, you got to get a lead flow turned on, and that might take a week. And then you start getting leads, and you got to get 20 leads to get one driver on average, no matter where you get it from, whether it's Facebook, Indeed, whatever it is. So that might take a couple weeks to get 20 leads. And now if it's your first out of the 20 that you hire, then that's great, but it doesn't always work that way. So now you're another couple weeks to get your 20 leads. And then you're 2 weeks up to 2 weeks to process them through First Advantage. Now you're a month later, you went another 4 weeks without having that truck on the road. And as I understand it, it can be $5,000 to $10,000 in a month that you just paid for a truck to sit there. That's a big loss, rather than keeping your recruiting on for that 4 weeks previous, and you had the lead flow going, and it was maybe, let's just say $2,000 for that month. Well, now you spent $2,000, but you not only saved $5,000 plus that truck stayed on the road, so it made the additional revenue. We didn't even talk about the opportunity cost in that first example. We just talked about the real cost of your truck sitting there.
And you didn't even talk about points and availability, because if you're not doing the assigned runs, that's hurting you over time.
Right. Yeah. We didn't even get that far, and still makes a lot of sense to keep the trucks on the road.
But I'm sorry, if you have 10 drivers and they are all perfect, and you would be so sad to see any one of them leave, you're a unicorn, because the bell curve exists everywhere. If you got 10 drivers, you got 2 drivers you're madly in love with, you got a bunch in the middle that are okay, and then you got 2 that you wouldn't really be hurting much if you saw the back of them. That's just statistically true. And if you have 100 drivers, you got, a dozen that you wouldn't mind seeing the back of, and a dozen you do anything to keep, and the rest are in the middle, the bell curve, right?
Right.
And to me, it seems like if you're always recruiting, you always have a line in the pond. And when you get a great driver, you'll find work for them.
Right. Yeah, that's what I've heard a lot of people say is they can pick up spares. They can talk to the other contractors in the terminal and say, hey, I got an extra guy. Can I help you with some of your routes or whatever? However you can make it work. FedEx needs drivers. You guys need drivers. Like, you can probably find work for them to do if you come up with a few extra.
And a year ago, I would have said, if you can find additional drivers, FedEx is probably giving out routes, and you could then suddenly find yourself getting awarded more routes or more runs, whether they're assigned, unassigned, whatever. Today, the challenge is multiplied because you also got a problem with finding the trucks. I know that.
Right.
But I haven't heard anybody say, oh, no, drivers are easy to come by. That doesn't exist.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard that either.
Crazy thought. Have you heard of any contractors working together in terms of finding drivers, or is it sort of dog eat dog out there between contractors?
Yeah, I've talked to a few contractors about potentially doing that. Nobody's pulled the trigger on it, but I mean, there's definitely that possibility, and I think it's a reasonable idea, especially two small contractors that each have 5 to 10 trucks. Now you pool the money, or you split the cost of recruiting, because like I said, it's not cheap. It's a big expense in your business. So if you can split that cost between the two of you, to even if it's to help keep the recruiting turned on when you both are full, because hopefully you're both full. But if you are, I'd recommend at least doing something, having something out there to keep it going. So.
Because I heard a story where one contractor was saying they got a fantastic recruit, but the recruit was in Savannah, and they didn't operate out of Savannah, and the recruit didn't want to move. But they called another contractor in Savannah and said, "Listen, I've got a great lead here. Can I hand him off to you?" Yeah. And it seems to me that probably happens more than you'd think.
Yeah, and I think it's a great thing to do because, again, the biggest contractors that I've worked with, they view this as view all of the contractors together as a community, that if they can lift others, it lifts the whole industry. Really, it lifts the whole community. Rather than, I run into a few that they are a little bit more dog eat dog, but for the most part, I found that contractors really want to be respectful to one another as much as possible. I know everyone has stories of something else that happened, but for the most part, I hear that people want to do good by other contractors, and so that's one way. Like, you give somebody a driver, that's unbelievably positive in building goodwill.
I hear in line haul, it's very much like that. P&D might be a little different because there's more of a sense of competition within.
Yeah, I do hear that. Yeah, I've done a little bit in P&D, but not much.
I'm looking through some of the questions that I wrote down before we met. Do you have any opinion on these stories that I'm hearing where drivers are getting offered $5,000-$10,000 signing bonuses?
Yeah, I've heard some crazy signing bonuses. I've heard like 30 to 50,000 is the highest I've heard outside of FedEx.
Outside of FedEx.
Yeah. I would say, like, my clients, I think less than half of them are offering sign-on bonuses.
Okay.
So again, the nice thing, like, you offer sign-on bonuses because when you're in a job board where there's, let's say we're in the Florida market, a driver in Florida is looking for a job, and they're going to just go down the list. And they're going to see Florida job, Florida job, Florida job, Florida job, Florida job. They're probably going to go for the one that says $15,000 sign-on bonuses. It's an eye catcher,
right?
Even though there's some hidden hooks in the back end, right? Yeah, the nice thing is when we go to the other pond, you go back to the very first thing we talked about. You go to the other pond. Now you're standing out in the news feed where they're watching cat videos. You're standing out because you're offering $90,000 plus a year as a team driver. You're standing out because you're offering home daily as a solo company, as a solo driver. When they're on the road for 2 weeks at a time, now you're offering them home daily in the same amount of money. Like, you're standing out because of that, because they're not looking at 15 other jobs that are offering home daily, and so you're showing up in a totally different pond. And so again, some of my clients in some tougher markets, they are offering sign-on bonuses, but for the most part, if I had to guess a percentage, I would say 30 to 40% are offering sign-on bonuses and 60 to 70% are not offering sign-on bonuses, being successful.
Can I shift gears with you, going back to the fishing, and talk about trying different baits, different lures? Do you do A/B testing with your clients?
So the really cool thing is that I have gotten a lot of A/B testing out of the way, to be honest.
Okay.
So we're still doing it. Don't get me wrong. Like we'll publish, whenever we publish a campaign, which we'll publish a campaign as often as we need to maintain the performance. But on average, let's say several times a month when we're publishing new campaigns, every single time we're publishing like 15 new ads with a mixture of audiences and pictures and ad copy and all this different stuff, right? All the technical stuff.
Can I pause there? Because I might have lost some folks who aren't familiar with what A/B testing is, and I want to explain it so that people who are watching this know what I'm talking about. And correct me if I get this wrong, because you're really the marketing guru. But in essence, let's say that I am a contractor and I'm going to post an ad on Indeed or on Craigslist or on Facebook, and I'm going to say $75,000 a year, health benefits and something, right? And that's my ad. What A/B testing is to say, let's do 4 or 5 different variations on that ad. Let's, instead of highlighting $75,000 a year first, let's highlight the benefits first in bigger letters, or let's highlight home all the time or new equipment, right? Let's do variations. Let's put them out there and let's actually monitor what the hit rate is on the different variations. And as we figure out which is the better variation, let's go with that and drive that one home. It's time consuming. You have to have the tools to do this right. And the reason I asked Mitch about it was, if you're not doing that, you're hoping that that one ad you created is the good one. But if you're emphasizing the wrong thing in your market, and it's like fishing, if you've got the wrong lure, there might be fish all over the pond and none of them are biting on that lure right now. I went fly fishing one time and I didn't have a clue what I was doing. They were literally swimming between my legs and I couldn't get anything to bite. But with any type of advertising for recruiting, you got to do that. So I interrupted you, Mitch, and if I screwed up that explanation, correct it. But I wanted people to know what A/B testing means. Is you got version A and version B, figure out which is better. Okay, B is better. Now let's go create different variations of B, figure out which one's better, and keep going. It's like at the eye doctor when they say better, worse, till they get to the best one.
Yep, that is a very good explanation. And like I was saying, I've gotten a lot of A/B testing out of the way. I've tested, at the beginning, I tested a whole different strategy where we were doing a multi-step process and all of this stuff, technical stuff on the back end, and it worked horribly. It was bad. We went like 3 weeks without getting any leads. But then I changed it. I went back to the drawing board, changed it, and then we started getting leads right away. It's gone really well now. I've tested different landing pages. I've tested different images. I've tested different ad copy. And what we do is when we find an ad copy, then we'll put it down in our folder and store it as another good version of ad copy, so that then we can use it. At this point, the first battle is A/B testing, and I say really I have most of that out of the way. Sometimes there are still times where we do some actual testing. But any more than really what we're doing is we're doing different variations of ads to keep it fresh. Because we can put new pictures, we can put new headlines, we can put new ad copy, all the written text, the little paragraph above it on Facebook. And so we're in these markets where, Kansas City is a good example. I've been running ads in Kansas City for almost 3 years now. And there's only so many drivers in Kansas City. And I've probably reached every single one of them, I would imagine. That's on Facebook in that time. And so we have to keep the ad fresh. And so we change up the pictures, we change up the headline, we change up the focus of the ad, whether it's the home time or the pay or the weekly pay versus the annual pay, or we change up all these things, the audiences, to try to hit a different little corner of the market. We're doing all these things on the back end to maintain the cost per lead. Because if you just put up an ad and leave it, there's been a few times where I can leave an ad for like 2 months. It's amazing. It's awesome because it just keeps working. It's good for the client. It's good for me. It's good for everyone because it just keeps cranking out the leads. But that almost never happens. We're changing up these ads every 1 to 2 weeks to keep it fresh and to keep the cost per lead consistent.
Yeah, I mean, I can't emphasize this enough because a lot of people have a very rudimentary idea of put the ad up, right? And you said in one sentence, we're really not doing a lot of testing. We'll create 15 ads. And people don't understand that that's not a lot of testing in your world.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
we're going to have 15 variations. That's not doing a lot of testing. And
yeah. And then, I mean, in addition, we also, we're running over probably 20 to 30,000 a month in ad spend in the FedEx market across different geographical markets. So we combine all that data together to make it more efficient for everyone, really. Because we move a lot faster that way versus one contractor that might have $1,000 a month budget. We do move a lot faster in that regard.
Do you see any trends going on right now in terms of getting easier, getting harder? I'm just curious right now what you feel like the market is like.
The bad news is that it's getting harder.
Really?
Yeah. I would say, like I've referenced a couple times, I've been doing this for 3 years, and it was never easy at the beginning. For the contractors that were earlier in that, it's never been easy to recruit truck drivers, I would say. But maybe a long time ago when I was like 10, maybe it was easy. I have no idea. But in the last 3 years, it's never been easy, but it's getting harder because the craziest statistic I've heard is that there's 2 million trucks on the road, but we need 3 million. So there's a massive shortage. So then the people that are paying for the loads, like outside of FedEx, like in the broader trucking world, right? They're willing to pay more because they just got to get the freight moved. So they'll pay whatever it takes to get their freight moved, right? So then that allows the company to pay their driver more. So then the drivers are getting more picky about what they'll take and what they won't take. They're getting more picky about the pay. And so now some other companies might be offering the 90,000 plus a year as a solo driver home daily, whereas FedEx guys are trying to offer 90,000 plus. You're home once a week and you have to drive with a teammate. It's getting harder in that regard. It is switching a little bit to where the drivers are in the driver's seat when it comes to recruiting as well, where they can kind of ask for what they want, and if you won't give it to them, they might go looking elsewhere. So obviously you can still be successful. I have, my clients are recruiting new drivers every single month. And so it's still possible. I don't want to paint a picture that it's impossible, but it's definitely getting harder right now.
Fair to say anybody out there who's not making it a top priority is going to struggle?
Yeah. Yep. I would say that's very fair to say.
Normally this would be the point, Mitch, where I would ask the folks watching, if it was live, if they have questions. So I'm going to turn it back on you because I'm a bit of a ding dong. What are some of the things I should have asked you that I didn't ask you?
Yes. Let's see if I can think of anything. We talked about having automated text responders. I would say another thing to talk about is screening out drivers ahead of time. I get a lot of feedback from people that are working on Indeed that they'll get people that they're applying for their job and they don't even have a Class A. And the reason that they say that happens is because to continue receiving an unemployment check, you have to apply for so many jobs a week or something. And so it's pretty obvious if you don't have a Class A and you apply for a job that requires a Class A, you're not going to get the job. So, but you can check that box in the unemployment process and, keep getting your unemployment checks because you applied for a job that week. I'm not going to say that doesn't happen with Facebook, but it doesn't happen as often. And in addition, what I was originally saying is screening out your leads automatically ahead of time. So wherever you're recruiting, figure out, because I think there is some ability on Indeed, figure out how to ask them some questions. And if they don't answer the right answer, then kick them out. Like if you only want leads with more than 1 year experience, just kick them out. Don't even have the lead come into your inbox, because it's just going to, especially if you're a smaller contractor, you have to deal with all of them yourself. Just get those kicked out ahead of time.
I'm gonna build on that, because years ago I was taught from a sales standpoint a very counterintuitive notion of work very hard to get to know the word no as quickly as you can. And it's counterintuitive, because when you're trying to sell, when you're trying to recruit, you don't want to hear no, right?
Right.
But you'll hear it in the video with Ed Trout. If you've got a driver who's got a disqualifying event in his record, there's no miracle to get it through First Advantage, right?
Yeah.
So better to find that out before you ever waste the time loading everything into First Advantage, right?
Mhm.
Because if they're not going to make it through the process, get them out of your worldview and focus on the people who might make it through the process, instead of spending cycles on someone who's going to be a no, but you don't find out till later.
Right.
So yeah, awesome point. Mitch, we're going to put all of your contact info and mine on the bottom in various spots in the video at the end here. Are you on the FedEx Line Haul Contractors Facebook group if people have questions and want to reach you there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we're going to.
Yeah, they can tag me, ask me a question. It's just Mitch Adams on Facebook.
Okay.
And I'm always happy to give advice, give ideas, point you in the right direction, because recruiting is a tough game out there. And so I just like helping people get pointed in the right direction.
And you're going to be in Dallas at the conference in July, right?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yep, I'm excited to be there.
In fact, I think I heard that you're going to be moderating a panel on recruiting with a bunch of contractors sharing their thoughts on everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to get their take on all of the sources that they do. Oh, that's another thing that we should talk about. You should continue doing all of the sources of recruiting. Like I kind of put myself against Indeed, because you gotta have a battle here, right? But I would stay on Indeed. Like keep your ads there, because although you don't get a lot typically, a couple of my clients do very well on Indeed, but I would stay there. Like do all of the things is really my point. Do Facebook, do Craigslist, do Indeed, do all of the job boards, do ZipRecruiter. Keep doing all of them, because at any moment, any of them could get shut down. Any of them could stop working. So do all of them. And all of the biggest contractors do that as well. They do all of the things. You can't this isn't finding a magic bullet. Like I have an additional good tool, but it's not, especially in today's market, it does not cure all of your recruiting woes. It helps. It doesn't cure the problem. You have to keep doing everything you can to recruit.
There's just no way to avoid the work, is there?
No, not really.
Which I guess makes sense if staffing's your core competency, your core business.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Mitch, I cannot thank you enough. This has been awesome. And I look forward to talking to you again soon and seeing you in Dallas. Yes,
I appreciate it. Appreciate you asking all the questions and getting to share what I've learned, a little bit about what I've learned.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. If you've stayed this far, can't thank you enough, and look forward to the next conversation, whatever that might be.
Yep.